Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. Are you stuck in a deadlock in your divorce with your ex? Do you feel like you can't move on and it's getting nowhere fast? We have 3 common deadlocks that we will be discussing today and learn today what you can do about it. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura.
Now, this one sounds like a very interesting one, but it is like a very common question we get asked a lot, and you get asked a lot, I believe, with our members about these deadlocks where everything's just grinded to a halt.
And you want to, if you're being proactive, and our listeners are very proactive, I think they're learning about this stuff and they're following the process. But what do you do when your ex isn't following the process? Some people feel like they're stuck in one stage or another of like their property settlement or with children. And so, and I'm afraid the courts don't really anticipate anyone not doing what they're told. They expect we all will follow the rule, but some people just don't.
So we have done a whole episode on delay tactics in divorce, and we look into why your ex might be doing these delays and why you might be stuck in a deadlock, and it might not be what you think. So definitely go listen to that episode as to the why it might be happening. But in this episode, we're going to talk about what you can do about it, regardless of their reason of why they're doing this, dragging their heels and driving you absolutely insane. And first of all, I do want to say to anybody who's listening to this who is pulling their hair out, going insane, just wants it to be over, before we get into the deadlocks of valuations, disclosure and stonewalling, Mum, what can you say to our listeners who are pulling their hair out and just wanting disclosure? They just want it to end. They just want people to move on. What do you say, Mum?
Oh, I say I feel for you. I really feel for you. In the current climate, I guess, in the court is kind of like a tractor beam pulling the cases through the system and out the other side. So you don't just have you that wants it over. You've got the court who's got the powers, and they really want it over. So all you do, I mean, in general, if you had the time, is dob them into the court. The court has a variety of options for you, but we don't often think to use them. We do our one step and then we expect them to do a step back. And when they don't, lawyers sometimes forget they've got a lot of options as well. So I just want to say to everyone, you're going to get through it and the court is going to help you to get through it. But sometimes we have to help ourselves a little bit with some creative options while we're waiting for that next court date to happen.
So let's get into this deadlock. Let's start off with disclosure, because it is probably the most common one I've ever heard of. My ex won't give me, we can't start mediation. We don't know what the property pool is. Like, they're stuck in this turmoil. What strategies can you give? What out of the box ideas as well to help people get out of this common deadlock? So
you recognise the words there. He won't give me, or she won't give me. They won't let me move on, all of that. So you have to turn that around a little bit and say, okay, it's not disclosure, it's discovery. We used to call it discovery. And there are a number of ways you can find out what you need to know without waiting for them to give you a document. So one of the ways is to issue a subpoena if you're in court. Another way is to send a form to their superannuation people. Sometimes you're a joint holder on the account, so you can look into it even if you never have. There's searches you can do online to see what properties they own. And if all else fails and you can't get all of the information you want, where stuff has gone to, for instance, money has gone, just all you have to do is add up where you saw it leave. If they've been taking out hundreds of dollars in cash every week and you just know they're socking it somewhere, you don't have to show where it went. You only have to show that it was there and then it was gone and it was them. So add those up and say, as far as we're concerned, if you haven't got any other evidence to show us, we can prove you took it. We don't care what you did with it. We can prove you took it and we want to add it back. So sometimes people hunt down a rabbit hole a bit too far. You only need to show enough for your case. So you've got to keep in mind what you've got to prove. You may never know everything that they're doing. And I think I've told you about those dodgy types who've been sending money over to the number one betting shop, and they had a positive balance in a Solomon Islands bank betting thing. Yeah, so and people put positive amounts, like put extra money in their credit cards as well.
So what you're saying is it's not about they won't give it to me. You can change it into I'm going to go find it, and you can do your own disclosure. There is an episode we have done called DIY Disclosure where Mum gives all her amazing tips and tricks on how to get that information yourself. Definitely check that out. It's 40 minutes of gold. There's also, then you said the next option for that is to just add up all the money that's basically gone missing. You can see it in the bank account and then it's gone. Add all that money up and say, what do you say in a letter to an ex? If you're just like, this money keeps disappearing, what do you say in a letter?
You just say, and of course the property pool includes $25,000, which you've taken out of the account over the last 8 months. Then it doesn't matter what they did with it. They will pretty soon, if he was using it for rent or for food or whatever, if the other person was, they'll pretty quickly then give you the evidence of what they used it for. But if they can't prove to the contrary, you've got the best evidence there is, and the judge is entitled to rely on that. And he adds an explanation.
And you've also said another third option is if you're in court, you can subpoena or you can do the superannuation check. Mum, there was this other one that you've said a few times to people about the magic E when it comes to the deadlock of disclosure. Can you talk us through the magic E?
I've always called it the magic E because as a lawyer, I'm not that fond of numbers. And the magic E helps you from getting too stressed. E means estimated. And if you put a capital E in front of anything, even though it's a sworn document, it says, look, as far as I know, this is what it is. So you put that magic E in front of what you think they might have in a bank account. And if you can prove that there is such a thing as a bank account, or like I said, they've taken the money, or you've seen one bank statement from a bank and it's never been seen, that bank's not in the disclosure, just put an E and put a number. And sometimes I put a really high figure and they will run to prove you wrong. So it just kind of evinces a response. Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to this particular deadlock of disclosure, basically what you're saying is just take it on. Go, okay, you're not going to help me, then I'm going to try all these other ways to get to it. What happens if it still doesn't happen? You go to mediation, there's no disclosure, so basically it's a waste. Is there anybody else who can stop the deadlock?
Yeah, the court can stop the deadlock. I wouldn't be going to mediation if you don't have a good idea of what the property pool is. It is just a waste. So you write them a letter and say, I'd love to go to mediation and we've got this mediation booked and it's going to cost this much money, but hey, you haven't made disclosure. So instead, I'm going to cancel that mediation, which is a bold step, unless you give me that information by, give a deadline of 3 or 4 days. And then I will be telling the court on the next occasion that you didn't make disclosure. And the court will then order them to make disclosure or order third party or issue a subpoena. So you get that information out. Another way of doing it, though, Laura, is to, again, just estimate the maximum. And say, these are the numbers I've got for court now, and unless you show to the contrary, this is what we're using.
Now, I think it's important Mum's giving example letters to write, but don't go doing any of that unless you've had individual legal advice.
That's true.
This is a community education, legal education. We're trying to just talk you around some ideas. We're spitballing. Mum's definitely not telling you what to write in a letter. Definitely go see your own lawyer before you do that. Definitely see a lawyer before you cancel a mediation. And,
because there could be consequences. So you need to know you're in the right at that stage.
And I think that's an important point to mention as well. I think there's a point in your deadlock where you have to decide, and always see a lawyer before making this, when are you going to drop the rope? Are you going to keep pulling and pulling and pulling to find the last $200? Or are you going to go, you know what, there's only so much energy I want to put into this before I have no energy left, and is it really worth it? So I think you've got to weigh up that.
And you have to weigh up whether your future self will kick you for doing that, or if your future self can live with that, because a lot of people just do that. They go, you know what, it's not worth it. And you need to know too, sometimes the stuff that they're not disclosing, when you really look at it, it's not necessary for you to know about it in order to make a proposal or have a rough idea. You don't need too much historical stuff. You mostly need what the property pool is now.
Have you come across anybody who you think, and I hate using this word because it's used too often on women in particular, that are just paranoid, and you think maybe they just can't let go of the idea that there's no more money and that they think someone's hidden it, but there is no hidden money? Do you come across people like that?
Yeah, you do. And it's hard to accept. But so often I say to them, well, think about what is your ex-partner's spending habits? What are they like? Are they likely to be saving, or do they spend it the minute they get it? And there are people in most relationships that break down, at least one's a spender, one's a saver. Yeah,
so the deadlock could be technically being caused by yourself if your ex actually has just spent it all on ridiculous things that can't be reclaimed back, and you're just like, well, there's got to be more. So make sure you've done some really intense looking internally at what your feelings are. And maybe your ex is a really sneaky, manipulative person, but they also could be bad with money.
And when you go to court, it's the evidence that matters. So if you don't have evidence, then the court's not going to magically find that evidence for you. That's why I say if you've got evidence, for instance, like that money being siphoned out of the account, or someone who's taken your mortgage offset and just taken it all out, don't spend any time on looking where it went if they won't show you. The evidence you can show the court is, here's the account the day before, here it is after, and the withdrawal was by him, and here, and just prove that it went. You don't have to prove where it went.
So I think that is the answer to the question I was just about to ask you. We had a lovely person write in recently who they haven't fully split yet, but they're worried because they've noticed that their partner or their ex about to be is buying lots of Apple gift cards, lots and lots of them, $800 worth and stuff at a time. But no groceries, but buying them at Woolworths.
Yeah.
She's a bit worried, I would say, that that's going to be money that just disappears. What do you say to her?
It didn't disappear. It's gone into Apple gift cards. And so there you go. You're entitled to assume he hasn't spent it or she hasn't used those cards for anything else, and it's up to them to prove they did use it for something else.
Yep. So get the evidence, have the receipt, show it.
And if they've got it in a bank account somewhere, they can either produce that bank account or be silent. But either way, it's going to get brought back into the pool because you're the one with the evidence.
Great.
I mean, that's a bit creative, isn't it? I hadn't heard of that one before.
Yeah, well, that's a new one that I heard. But yeah, lots and lots of Apple gift cards. I guess later on you could go and buy computer stuff. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, very odd. Going on so that's disclosure, deadlock and disclosure. You're saying do it yourself, add up all the missing money, and then say to the other side, you prove where it went, because otherwise it's going back in the pool. Use the magic E and just estimate and see if they'll jump to correct you. Subpoena, go to court, and then basically make sure you're not the one that's causing the deadlock because you're trying to find something that doesn't exist. Let's go on to the next deadlock that happens all the time, Mum.
Right.
Valuations. That's a huge deadlock. The valuations. So let's think about whether it's the house or whatever, but everyone usually has a house. They need to get it valued in their separation, and then just what happens in these deadlocks?
Okay, so in a perfect world, you would each agree that this house is worth Y amount of money because the house up the road sold and it's very similar, and it goes in at that value. It's an agreed value. No valuations are needed. If valuations are needed, it's either nobody's got any idea, which is a bit hard to accept, or one of you is wanting it to come in higher or lower or whatever. So if you're the person, or if you're needing to get a valuation, it's already an indication to me that someone is a little bit unreasonable. And here are the things that can happen. The person in the house might not let the valuers in. They might trash the place, not keep it tidy, not mow the lawn. They do, yes. And that can be an issue. Some people just don't even accept the valuation proposal. You know, that you write a letter offering 3 valuers and or 3 real estate agents if you just want an appraisal, and they don't say anything. So the ways around this are, one, if you're looking at getting a valuation and you think the other person has diminished the value of the house, you can ask the valuer to have a look at the house as if, give a value in its current state, and give a valuation for if it was cleaned up, you know, lawn mowed, house clean, what it would get. That will get you around those issues. If you are trying to get a valuer, a decision about a valuer or a real estate agent, then you could give them like 3 names. That's what you do. I've chosen these 3. Which one do you want? But the important thing with the person who's delaying and deadlocks, you say, these are the 3 valuers, and if you don't get back to me in 14 days, I will choose one and get the valuation rolling. And that way they know it's not going to stop just because they don't answer you. You're going to choose one, and they can't complain. They didn't agree, you know, they didn't find one. But then, of course, you get the problem that they might not let the valuers in at all. And that's where sometimes either a curbside valuation is helpful, or, you know, the internet these days, Laura, every property that's ever been rented or sold has pictures on these real estate sites. Some valuers I've seen have been able to just go through those pictures, ascertain what the house is like. That'll be really good, actually, if you bought the house a few years ago and your ex is letting it run to rack and ruin. Make sure the valuers know about these pictures and what the place did look like before they got into messing around. So there's lots of things you can do to get a figure. You just want a figure to move on with. And it's better if a valuer is chosen by the 2 of you and done as a single expert witness. So that proposal I had where you offer 3, and if you don't choose one, I will, that kind of makes them a single expert, whether they like it or not.
You're saying is, you know, offer them 3, try and get that done that way. If they won't let him in, go and do it by the curb. If it's not the house and it's valuation of stuff, what happens if, because yes, you can do a curbside valuation of a house because you can't hide a house. What happens if they hide stuff? Say they've got like a vintage Cadillac, or I don't know, a giant diamond Bulgari wristband or something. What happens then if the valuer turns up and it's just not even there?
Okay, well, those things will have been insured.
Right.
And probably when they were bought, you would have had valuations or something. You'll have a photo of someone swanning around. What is it, a Bulgari diamond bracelet?
Made that up
or that Cadillac.
Yeah.
You may have photos that it did exist. And the presumption that you should make and assert to the other side is that unless you produce that document, that car, that bracelet, that insert things here for valuation, I'm going to assume that you've kept it or sold it. And the best evidence before the judge will be, these are the insurance papers for these items. Here are photos of these items. And if you have been listening to us for long enough, Laura, you'll have taken a video of your household, wouldn't you, as
before
you leave?
You left. Yeah.
If you can do it safely.
Is that the same for artwork? Does artwork get included? Because I know we've had that question recently.
Yeah. There's a company that can value artwork. It's amazing. I've got a company valuing a plane. They can value boats, old organs, old pianos. So there's a couple of companies that have what they have. Obviously, they don't have an aviation valuer or a marine valuer in their permanent staff, but they can outsource all of this to get valued. And, you know, it's not just stuff that gets valued, it's superannuation as well. Some superannuations, like the military one, needs to be valued.
What about if for our people that they don't have Bulgari wristlets and they don't have a Cadillac, they've just got like a car and some stuff in the house?
Yep, like most of us, yeah.
And a valuation is going to cost usually like $2,000, $1,000, and they don't want to do that. But their ex is arguing. How do you undeadlock that where you can't even afford to pay?
Well, like you said before, the first thing to do is look at yourself. Am I being difficult about this thing because it was such a drama in our marriage and I'm just over it and I'm not going to let him have one more bit of this thing? If it's you, really do some soul searching and what is it worth to you to insist on this item, being valued? Another way of doing it is to, if you know what's in each room, do 2 lists and say he can have one or she can have one and you can have one. You can do 2 lists, get the valuers to value it off the list of things, like they can probably give a range, or you can look on Facebook Marketplace, or you can look on Redbook and see and get some estimates of all of the things and make them roughly equal, and then get them to the other side to choose one. If you've left a stack of stuff in the house, then again, you can recreate a list for the purposes of it being valued, or you can demand that you be allowed to take more of the stuff, when the time comes. So yeah, it's about attitude adjustment, a lot of it.
So realistically, Mum, in a normal relationship breakup, with the mediations that you've done and the clients that you've had, how much of things that aren't house, car, boat, caravan, I don't know, expensive things are actually ever really included in a mediation? Like, how far down do valuers have to go? Like, how is it down to the toys? Is it down to the, I don't know, the cutlery, or do they not get involved in? You know, you could find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. We're there waiting for you right now. If you want to get more out of the Divorce Course, all you have to do is go to the Divorce Course podcast at Facebook or TikTok, or the Divorce Course on Instagram. There we share bite-sized pieces of information and bite-sized inspiration and motivation to help you through this difficult time. Come and join our community and let us know you've joined. We'd love to see you there. Like, how far down do valuers have to go? Like, how is it down to the toys? Is it down to the, I don't know, the cutlery, or do they not get involved in it?
Yeah, it's seldom that low down. So, but antiques are the worst, because everything that's an antique seems to be very special, and you can't just go down to the shops and buy another one the same, or gifts. But no, they don't go down to that ephemera, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why you can be comfortable with that is that if you've kept the house, then you've probably got the knives and forks and spoons and can openers, etc. And the person who moved out has replaced the knife, the fork, the spoon and whatever. So that sort of stuff doesn't normally get into the valuations. But it is, like I always say, I don't do furniture fights. The court will not do furniture fights.
Okay.
They will attribute a dollar figure to what you've got and a dollar figure to what they've got, and sometimes they make it equal. And if you don't take it when you go, it's going to be very hard to get it, those little things. Like, I'm looking at your lovely terracotta warriors, your pink ones up there. I mean, if you don't grab that in your Barbie book, you know, if you were leaving, well, you'll probably never see it again. The hard truth is,
if you've got a terrible ex, like, surely not everybody's ex is a poo bum, but it's good to remember that.
Stonewallers.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into the I'd say this is probably the biggest deadlock issue of everything, because it does encompass pretty much every topic anyway. But it's when, and I guess it's a bit of avoidant, but it also could be manipulative, controlling, is they just stonewall you. You're stuck in this deadlock because they just won't answer, and you're banging your head against a wall. And I can see some people's, divorces and breakups go for years because the other person's just dragging their feet because they don't care. Maybe because they're in a better position. Maybe they're in the house, and they're living their best life. They're like, why do I want to settle when I can just keep living this way? So, Mum, what do you say about stonewalling? What kind of stonewalling tactics do you see? And then let's talk about how to fix it.
Okay. So I see it sometimes, obviously, with getting valuations and so forth. Sometimes with paying money that they're supposed to pay. Sometimes they don't respond when you write the first letter, but they'll say, oh, we've got your letter and we'll let you know in a couple of weeks. And then that drifts on and drifts on. And the person who is being stonewalled is like, well, I can't really do anything because they've said they'll give me these things, but they haven't, And so that's a way of stonewalling. Another one is just not filing their documents. Of course, with disclosure, it's that, but, just kind of not responding when you put sensible proposals to them. Like, you might write a letter and say, look, just about our cars, there's about the same kilometrage, they're about the same value. I reckon, let's just say they're even, right? here are 2 red book value. I reckon they're right. And you write to them and nothing. It's just crickets from the other side. What you need to do is always have a kind of or else at the end. A bit like raising kids, tidy up your room, you give them a deadline. It's like SMART, isn't it? That you've got to have that sustainable, clear goal with a timeline. So every time you send something, even if you think they'll be okay, remember to put a deadline and an or else. So the deadline, I suppose I've moved into how to solve it. Yeah, sorry.
Can I just ask before we move in? Can I just ask, do lawyers use the stonewalling tactic? Because I have had people write in saying, my ex's lawyer isn't answering anything. My ex's lawyer doesn't respond, or do lawyers do it?
No, I don't think so. I think you might get a lawyer who's truly, truly busy and they're struggling to get their work out. But usually you've got to remember a lawyer can't act without instructions. So if you write a letter, they pop it off to your ex and say, what are your instructions? And then your ex goes off on holidays or something and doesn't answer. It's not really the lawyer's fault. The lawyer, if he doesn't or she doesn't follow their client's instructions promptly, I was just reading a case the other day. The Legal Services Commissioner, after them, they get fined. It's unprofessional, or it's even professional misconduct to not follow your client's instructions. So in this day and age with fast emails and so forth, I would generally think it's your ex who hasn't paid their lawyer or who isn't answering their lawyer. Is
it ever though a tactic? Like, is it a legal tactic to because we talk about delay tactics in that other episode, but do lawyers do it for a reason? No?
I hope not.
No,
I mean, sometimes people will, not lawyers, but the other side might not answer because they can wait for their deadline to cross over. If it's going to be coming up to 12 months from divorce and their tactic of their strategy is to not respond and hope you forget about the deadline or 2 years for separation. But it's a dirty tactic and it's I wouldn't think a reputable lawyer would do that.
All right. So most of the stonewalling is usually done by your ex or at the direction by your ex, or they just don't talk to their lawyer, don't give them directions, and then they're kind of stuck. So
I think even if a client directed you to not answer, it wouldn't be professionally correct for you to, as a lawyer, to follow those instructions.
Right. Right.
You've got an obligation to the court and to your client to move the matter through. So,
okay. All right. So you're being stonewalled.
Yep.
They're not responding. So you're talking about the SMART method, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you write a letter that's using that SMART method?
Okay. So the first thing is specific, right? Mm-hmm. So you might give them 7 days or 14 days is more often, but you might instead say, if I don't hear from you by 2 p.m. on the, 15th of March, whatever, then I will do this. Okay. So it's clear there, and you'd be surprised how often in my career, I've done that. I put a time and say, and our client will then instructs us to file immediately. That at 5 to 2 or 5 to 3, whatever your deadline is, suddenly everything starts turning up on your computer because they can't just put it off. So it's very specific.
So I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yes.
If I got that letter, then I would say, well, who died and made you boss?
Oh, would you now?
Well, I'm just playing devil's advocate. So how does that work then if they're like, why did your deadline matter?
Yeah, yeah. So then your response to that is, well, I'm dobbing. Because I'm not the boss, but the court is the boss. Okay. And if I tell the judge, you're in big trouble. If I tell mum, you're in trouble.
So can I ask this question then?
Yep.
So you say, if you don't respond by this date, this is going to happen, or I'm going to do this. Yeah. If you don't choose a valuer, I'm going to choose the valuer. Let's use that example. They don't respond. You choose the valuer.
Yeah.
They don't like the valuation.
Tough luck.
you go to court, you say, well, I said this letter, I got
And
the
here it
value,
is.
he didn't respond,
Yeah.
I got the value, now he's not liking it. What would a judge say?
A judge would say, well, you had the opportunity, sir or madam, to make a choice. You didn't. So what you do in that case is make sure that your letter with that very clear, specific, timely, actionable date on it and action on it, you attach that to a little affidavit of yours or tender it up, however you get it into evidence, and their lack of response. You say, I didn't hear anything, so then I've done this. And the court would probably applaud you because they want the matter to move forward. Although I just had a funny image of a judge clapping hands.
No judge is going to give you a standing ovation, but just remember, this is just legal education. This is a strategy, a smart strategy that you could put in place, but always check with the lawyer because it might be not perfect for your situation. And no judge is going to stand up and give you a clap. Has any judge ever clapped someone?
No.
Maybe sarcastically?
No.
No?
So these, you said out of the box. So I'm giving you my out of the box strategies that I've found have worked. It takes a bit of courage to do these things, but the alternative is to stay there every morning checking your email, wondering if you're going to get that email today or what am I going to do next. So in our course, we talk about you always have, when you send a letter or a request, you have two scenarios in your mind so that you either don't get a response in time or you do. And if you don't, then in your mind, you should have your next step planned so that no matter what they do, you're moving along to final settlement. Otherwise, these little tactics, even if each one along the way, each like 2 or 3 week delay, that can add 6 months to your agony, really. And I use my analogy of reeling in that fish from the surf, and the fish fights and it moves left and right, but you keep reeling. Yeah. And your ex is that fish and you just keep reeling.
Your ex is a fish. Mum, and there's plenty more fish in the sea too. Mum, so when it comes to giving them a time, and I know we've talked about this before, but if someone's only listening to this for the first time, what's a reasonable time for any if or else situation?
Yep. Look, I always like to give them 10 days. I used to give 14, but I think 10 is reasonable these days. And try to make the deadline not kind of like on a Friday afternoon or anything. And reputation matters. If your lawyer has a reputation of following through and with what they say they're going to do, then if someone else gets a letter from your lawyer that says they're going to do that, they go, oh, you better because she really is going to go to court or he really does go to court. So don't have any empty threats. Be ready to take that action.
And I know we've talked about deadlocks that have pretty much just all been about property because deadlocks with children is a whole different kettle of fish. There's the fish word again.
Yeah.
But are there any strategies for deadlocks when it comes to kiddies and
parenting? Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? Just look at compromises. Keep the child or the children centre mind, okay? And what's going to be less stressful for them and what's going to keep them the safest. And again, a lot of soul searching in your own, like just in case it's you, just in case you've gone through so much that you have a certain sort of way of reacting. And just make sure it's not you. If you think it might be you, wait another day before you send a hard letter.
Yeah. And I think there might be some people out there with manipulative and controlling exes, for example, who do like the deadlock. They're adamant they're not going to do whatever it is they're not going to do. And when it comes to children, sometimes I think you do have to just consider giving in. Otherwise, it's the kids that suffer, I guess. Yeah. And look, that can suck just going, oh, I have to give in to that ex, but when you look at what maybe when you're in a deadlock in a parenting situation or in negotiations or anything, have a look at, okay, well, if I don't do it and this drags on, what will be the outcome for the children? If I do it, what will be the outcome for the children? And if you have to take it on the chin, then it's better.
just as long as the kids are safe, that's got to be your priority.
Yeah.
But, I think that people, like a manipulative and controlling person, when they don't respond, they don't like being told what to do, but they want to tell you what to do. So their thoughts, I think their thoughts, their position seems to be that you'll get those documents when I say you'll get those documents, and you'll get a valuation or a response when I say you can, and not a minute before, Missy. And if that's how your life has been with that person, it's really easy to overreact with children. With property, go for gold. I know you say it's education only, but this is, you need to be able to take control of your case and move it forward. And I don't think there's sanctions. If you've done it properly, do it with your legal advice, but there's nothing wrong with asserting a date.
And being proactive. And being proactive and moving it along. And so it's the same if you've got an avoidant, because an avoidant is going to cause a deadlock because they're just not going to do anything. Yeah. You're going to have to be proactive, and it's probably your whole relationship has been you being the proactive one and solving everything. But in that situation, and as like the last thing you want to do is be proactive. But if they're not doing their disclosure, go be a detective. Go and find it out yourself. I think when it comes down to it, these deadlocks, I guess also with high conflict, Mum, deadlocks can happen because of he isn't. What do you say to people who are going through that high conflict isn't situation?
Well, quickly, if it's a valuation, get a valuer, get the red book. Ask them what they say it is, because sometimes they won't give you a figure. A conflict person, you'll put numbers in a letter and they'll go, that's not right.
Yeah. It's not Tuesday. The sky's not blue.
I don't live at 58 Greensland Street. I live at 59 Greensland Street. That's
an imaginary address, just in case anyone wants to know. We don't even know if that exists. But I guess what you've said in the past, Mum, with high conflict is when you're writing to them, write what you need to say, but then give them the evidence of what you're saying, and that shuts down a deadlock fight. Is that right? Because evidence shuts it down.
And that's why they might argue about the address or whatever, if you've sent the evidence. And look, in the absence of a response to the contrary, your affidavit will say, I've sent this evidence to my ex-partner and he did not take issue with it. So that's the sort of thing you do. But remembering, court is for people who are in conflict, whether it's high conflict or low conflict, whether both people are conflict driven or whether just one is. I mean, once you get into court, there are mechanisms to deal with that sort of behaviour, because the court's been doing this since 1976, and there's nothing your ex can try that hasn't been tried before. The difference in what I'm talking about here is it's sort of clever ways, I guess, or good ways of keeping the momentum going in your divorce and not falling sort of into the trap that they're setting for you of just wondering if they're going to answer.
And I guess as well, deadlocks are expensive. So if you have a deadlock over every single issue, the disclosure, the valuations, if you deadlock everything, if you've got a lawyer, backwards and forwards letters, it's expensive.
And it's not just the dollar cost. It's exhausting to deal with them. And the mental strain of waiting for them to do something keeps you in a heightened state of anxiety. So that's why we say when you send a letter, have some deadline, have a time, and follow through with that action that you said you would do.
And that great tip, Mum, I think for everyone's mental health, because I know what they do. They send the letter out and they go, what if he doesn't respond? What if she won't do what I've asked? What if she doesn't choose a valuer? And all these what if questions are running out in your head. I did hear a great quote. I was actually told by my daughter, and she said to me, turn your what ifs into so whats. That's what she does. So what?
My goodness.
And how do you turn your what if into a so what when it comes to this kind of stuff? And I think it's the thing that you always say, Mum, is before you even send the letter saying choose 3 valuers, and if you don't by this date, I will get one, have your second letter ready to go saying you haven't chosen by this date, so I'm doing this. So you won't have those what ifs running around in your head. You'll go, if he doesn't choose a valuer, so what? I've got letter number 2 ready to rock.
I love that. Haven't I got clever grandchildren?
You do.
But Laura, that's exactly what you do. And the common failing I see in younger lawyers sometimes is they don't, the deadline comes, the deadline passes, and then their client's ringing up and saying, he hasn't answered. Like the client's been watching the clock and they know, what do we do now? And then the lawyer writes them and said, well, we could do this or we could do that. And you're losing week after week after week. So what you need to do is what you said. You need to have a clear plan. And the reason I always put 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock is there's still an hour to file something in the court. And so I get it done on the day. You know, I have the documents in draft and they're ready to go. So, yeah, I love that. Turn your what ifs into so what.
And I think, the valuable point you've made here is if you're self-repping, if you're doing this yourself, and you don't have a lawyer, always go and see a lawyer, find out where you stand. But if you're saying do this or by this date, I'm going to do this, for goodness sake, do it, because I used to be a primary school teacher. And if I said to the kids, if you guys don't sit down in the next whatever, and this is going to happen, and I didn't do that, then the next time I say it, they don't care. So you got to show them you mean what you say and you're going to follow through with your, potential options if they choose unwisely.
Yes, and you've got to treat it like a business. It's something you've got to get through to the end, and you're the one who's driving this bus. You know,
and I think I think that's the best thing to remember. You're driving the bus. It doesn't take two to tango, like we've done in the How to Divorce a Statue episode. Right. Yep. You can do the whole thing yourself without them even saying boo. So go and listen to that episode. I'll put it in the show notes as well. Mum, time's up. We've come to the end of this time, but I think if you're in a deadlock, I hope some of this helps. I know that it's just so frustrating and so annoying because you just want to move on with your life. But obviously go see a psychologist, have some chocolate, go for a run, have a cup of tea. But yeah, we're here for you. Definitely send us a message in Spotify. If you've been stuck in a deadlock before, we'll put up a poll for that. And Mum, again, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your knowledge with us. And if anybody's got any what ifs, I want you to go and turn them into so whats.
I love it.
Okay.
Bye, Laura. Bye, everyone.
Good luck. If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.